Hello, welcome back to another Premier League video. Well, just another video, but it is a Premier League video, this one today, as you can see from the tier list. So, today's video is going to be our Premier League predictions. So I'm going to be predicting the Premier League and how I think it's going to finish. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up from the bottom to the top, starting in the relegation zone. Who I think is going down, talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to go up across all these tiers. So we got relegation, 18-20, because that's 3 teams that get relegated. Bottom half, 13th to 17th, you know, it's okay. He's staying up, but it's not amazing. Mid-table, that's decent. Conference League, it's the team that's going to finish in the Conference League. Europa League, well, that's just the 2 teams that finish in the Europa League. Champions League, that's the top 4, and then the Champions, that's the champions, obviously. So we're not going to go in alphabetical order, we're not going to go in a random order, we're just going to go from who I think is going to finish last, all the way to who I think is going to finish first. So let's start off by talking about, well, I guess, let's talk about the last team. So the team that I think is going to finish last, I think would be quite an obvious one for a lot of people. Some people are saying, no, this team actually could do quite decent. I do think they could, but I am going to put Ipswich Town last. I'm sorry, Ipswich Town fans. I just think, you know, they only just got promoted from League One when they were in the Championship, and they went straight up. Maybe that's just because they're brilliant, but I think they're not quite Premier League quality, and I think they're going to be down. But I do think they'll likely come back up because they're a very, very good team. Well, not very, very good, but they're a good team, Ipswich, and you know, this is going to be a brilliant Premier League season, I think. Actually, I think it could be one of the best Premier League seasons we're going to have in a while. And I think it's going to be very hard to send 3 teams down. But I'm going to do it anyway. So, Ipswich is my last place team. They do have a very good manager, McKenna, but I just don't think they're quite at Premier League quality. Okay, so my next team to go down is a team that was in the Premier League last season. I'm not going for all 3 newly promoted teams to go down. I am going, though, with a team that almost got relegated. They finished 17th last season, Nottingham Forest. They had a points deduction last season and still managed to survive, but barely, and not just because of their points deduction. They would have been fairly low without the points deduction. And so I'm putting them in the relegation zone. I think what I'm saying is it's very hard to say that these 3 teams are going to be the worst teams, because I could pick any of about like half of the Premier League teams and I could send them down. Honestly, any Premier League team, you could send them down, but I'm going with Nottingham Forest just because I feel like they haven't done loads of business, you know. They've got a decent team, but I don't think it's a team that's going to be staying up. And so I have them in 19th and going down. Now the last team, is it going to be a newly promoted team? Is it going to be another team that was already in the league? It That is a newly promoted team. Leicester City. Now, I mean, it's crazy. I think, well, it was about 8 years ago now that Leicester City won the Premier League. And then they were relegated. Now they've been promoted again. But I think they're going to be relegated again. I think they've got a decent squad. The problem is they've lost their manager straight away. And losing your manager as soon as you just after they've just helped you get to the Premier League and they're a brilliant manager like Enzo Maresca, losing them, that's a big blow at the beginning of the season. They're going to be very, and I think it's just going to be hard the first half of the season. They're going to have to adjust to the new manager. And so, I'm sorry, Leicester fans, but I've got them going down in 18th. So then, moving on to 17th, and this is the team that's just surviving relegation, I have Wolves. In my original predictions, I'm going to be honest, I did actually have Wolves going down. And because there's not a bunch of massive names you'll know, if you're not like a massive football fan, and so looking through the squad, but then once you actually look through their whole squad, they actually have a lot of good players, and Wolves are a good side, and Gary O'Neill's a brilliant manager, so I don't see why they would go down. But I do think they're going to struggle a little bit this season, purely because they haven't made too many signings, and they've lost, Max Kilman and Pedro Neto, who are two big players for them. Kilman obviously going to West Ham, and Neto going to Chelsea. So they're two big losses, and it doesn't look like they've filled in their boots just yet. But they do have quite a lot of good players. They've signed Larson, signed Gomez. They already have Lamina and Doherty and Ainuri and Hwang Hee-chan and Mateus Cunha. But I have them falling off just a little bit this season, but still surviving and staying on for next season, which they'll probably improve in and be back to where Wolves normally are, in the mid-table area. So moving on to 16th, and again, I do think this team will also just survive, and that is the final newly promoted team, Southampton. Obviously, no one's expecting them to be really high up because they've only just been promoted. A lot of people would say Southampton would be in the bottom 3. I'm going for them in 16th because I think they were very smart when they went down, and they did obviously sell Ward-Prowse. They did sell quite a few players, but then there's also other players that they just loaned out for a year because they were expecting to come back up again, which they've done. And so those players that they've loaned out have now come back because they want to play in the Premier League. And so, and they've got a pretty good team, They've signed Harwood Bellis to a permanent. Kyle Walker-Peters is brilliant. They've got a very good team. Carlos Alcaraz has just come back from his loan from Juventus. There is interest from him from Napoli, but at the moment he's still a Southampton player, and so I think Southampton have the quality to stay up. Ben Brereton Diaz has come in from, he was on loan from Sheffield United last year. He was on loan at Sheffield United, and he's come into Southampton now. And so that's a brilliant signing. They already had Adam Armstrong, Sekou Mara. Southampton, they have a good team, and a good enough team to stay up. Now, let's move on to 15th. 15th for me is Brentford. Now, you may be thinking, why have you got Brentford quite low? Well, I don't have... Brentford they are quite low down, yeah. 15th is fairly low down, but last season they finished 16th, so it's an improvement for them by 1 place. And they did half the season without Ivan Toney last year. And I think I would put them higher, but then when I just look at the other teams, I just look at them and just think, yeah, they're going to do a little bit better. But I do think the fact that they've kept Ivan Toney is probably what's saving me from putting them below Southampton and Wolves, and maybe even talking about putting them in the relegation zone. Because Ivan Toney he's a key player. They do have a very good squad even without him, but he's a key player. And when you manage to keep someone like Ivan Toney, who's got interest from all of the big Premier League clubs and all of the big clubs, if you manage to keep him, that's very helpful to keep him, and so they'll be happy that they've kept him. And I think that's gonna fairly comfortably keep them up. I do think they will quite comfortably stay up, not like Southampton and Wolves, but I do think at points they'll be quite low down, but then, they'll be confident that they can stay up, and they will stay up. Then moving on, Everton. Now Everton, I've also put a place up. See, they finished 15th last year. I have them in 14th. I have them in 14th because of a few players. Jordan Pickford. Yes, I know he's been there for ages now, but he is a brilliant keeper, and with a keeper like Jordan Pickford, it's pretty hard to go down. Jad Branthwaite. He had plenty of interest from a lot of teams, particularly Man United, but they've managed so far to hold on to him, and it doesn't look like he's leaving. There is interest from Man United, but they've rejected some bids from Man United, and it looks like Man United aren't going to try and sign him again now that they've signed De Ligt and Leny Yoro. So I think they've managed to keep Jared Branthwaite. Sean Dyche, brilliant manager. And under Burnley, when he was the Burnley manager, it would be like every season people would predict them to go down or predict them just to finish outside. And they would never go down. For ages, they just couldn't go down. And I think Sean Dyche just managed to always keep them up. I think Sean Dyche is a brilliant manager. And I think he's going to keep Everton up. And he's going to get Everton on the rise, because without their points deduction last season, they would have been very high in the table. But then again, were they only playing so well because they knew they had to because of their points deduction? I do think Everton have a brilliant team. And another one player to talk about, Iliman Ndiaye. They've just signed a former Sheffield United player. Then he went to Marseille for a year, and now he's signed for Everton. He made his debut in a friendly against Roma, and he's looking pretty good. So, yeah, that's another one. And the final player I'm going to mention, Tim Iroegbunam. I don't know if I said that right. He was in the Aston Villa under 21s last year, and then he was promoted to the Aston Villa team, and then Everton signed him, and he has been playing in friendlies, and he looks very good, and so I think him in the midfield is going to be big help, especially after they lost Amadou Onana. So, yeah. And so I have Everton in 14th. So moving up the table to 13th, I have gone with Fulham. Now, it's an interesting one. Fulham. They've signed Smith Rowe. They already have Muniz. They already have Willian, Traore, Jimenez. They've signed Quenza. They already had Bassi. They've signed Sessegnon. They already had Robinson, Castagna, Tete, Leno. Why have I got them in 13th? They're not in one of the mid-table spots. Well, because they've lost João Palhinha. I know that's one player. But at the same time, he was also a brilliant player. But it's not just because he was a brilliant player. He's a central defensive midfielder. And when you lose a CDM as good as Palhinha, and you don't replace him, because so far they haven't replaced him. They haven't bought in a Paulinho replacement. And so that's the only reason why I have them a little bit lower, is because they've lost Paulinho and they haven't replaced him. Not just because they've lost him, but because they haven't replaced him. And they need to do that if they want to finish higher. Yes, and there's still time in the transfer window, but I have them in 13th because I don't think they're going to replace him. I think it doesn't look like they are going to. They haven't singled out anyone as a favourite to sign, so I think at the moment 13th is where I have them in the Premier League. So we'll move on to the mid-table teams. Now, this is my favourite team next, who I have in 12th. Now, this is a one-place improvement on a finish last year. Finished 13th last year. Now, interestingly, just a random little fact, Bournemouth's highest ever finish in the Premier League was 8th. They did that under Eddie Howe. However, this season, finishing 13th under Andoni Iraola, they tied their highest ever points record. So they finished 8th before, but their highest ever points record came this season from 13th with 48 points. And that just shows how brilliant Andoni Iraola is, but also how the league's got more and more competitive. But Andoni Iraola is a brilliant manager, and with players like Justin Kluivert, Luis Sinisterra, Alex Scott, the youngsters, it's a brilliant team. At the back, they've had a brilliant centre-back partnership of Senesi and Zavanyi. Milos Kerkez at left back's brilliant, and they've now signed Dean Huijsen from Juventus as like a backup centre-back. He might burst into the first team though. I'm excited to see him. And they've now also signed Julian Araujo from Barcelona for 10 million. He's going to be likely the starting right back. They've got Enes Unal at striker. However, they have lost, so they do have that brilliant team, which is why I have them high. But I would have them higher if they hadn't lost Dominic Solanke, because like Brentford, he's their star man, he's their star striker, and they don't want to, and you wouldn't really want to lose him. But unfortunately for Bournemouth, they have lost him. He's gone to Spurs. They haven't yet replaced him. They do have Enes Unal though, who they did sign while Solanke was still at the club, so perhaps he'll take over. But they are targeting Eddie Nketiah. Right now, no signings were made, so we're going to base it off right now, and Enes Unal is the man up front, and I do think he's very good, and I do think Bournemouth are very good, but I think 12 is where I'm going to have them this season. But it's a one-place improvement on last season, so they'll take it, I hope. I mean, that's better than finishing where they finished last season. Moving up the list, another South Coast team, Brighton. In my original predictions, I had them the other way around. I literally couldn't decide Brighton or Bournemouth, who I wanted in 11th, who I wanted in 12th. And that's because both teams have a lot of good players. But I think I put Brighton just ahead, because when I look at their team, I see like very, very good players, Minter that they've just signed, obviously Matoma, Dingra, and they've still got the youngster Evan Ferguson, they've got João Pedro. It's a very good Brighton team that we're looking at this season, and so that's why I have them in 11th, because it's a very good team. Yes, they've got a new manager, but, actually, I've changed my mind. I'm changing my mind right now. I'm putting Bournemouth in 11th, Brighton 12th. That's just because they've got a new manager. I said it was Leicester. I could have had Southampton or Wolves going down instead of Leicester, because Brighton do have a very good squad, but the new manager, I'm not saying the new manager's bad. He's not. But it always just affects the team a bit when you bring in a new manager. So, yeah. I'm putting Bournemouth in 11th, Brighton 12th. So, moving up the order, it is Crystal Palace breaking into the top 10. And why do I have Crystal Palace there? Well, they've got Eberechi Eze, they've got Oliver Glasner, who since joining them made them absolutely brilliant, and Eze is a brilliant player. But they've also got Kamada, Sarr, Mateta, Lerma, Adam Wharton, who went to the Euros with England. So I think that is why I'm putting Palace up there. I would have them probably challenging for the Conference League and maybe even Europa League if they hadn't lost Michael Olise, because Olise and Eze are a brilliant duo. It doesn't look like they're going to lose Eze. It looks like they're going to keep him for one more year. But yeah, they did lose Olise to Bayern, so because Oliver Glasner. No, not Oliver Glasner. Oliver Glasner's a brilliant manager. Eze's a brilliant player. The rest of the squad's brilliant. But they've lost Olise, and that's going to deal a little bit of damage. But I'm sure the new guys will adjust brilliantly, and the team will be very good, which is why I have them top 10. And I think, yeah, they deserve to be top 10. They are a very good team. Yeah, so that's why I have them top 10. So, 9th, getting to the risen end of the mid-table. And in 9th, I'm going West Ham. For me, this was very tough because as soon as I looked at the West Ham team and all their new signings, I was like, I want to put West Ham in the Europa League or Conference League. But then, if you look at the other big teams, I think they'll just finish ahead of West Ham. But I'm just going to list off the signings now. Nicholas Fulkrug, Somerville, Kilman, Tadibo, Wan-Bissaka. Brilliant team, and they already had Jared Bowen, Kudus, Ward-Prowse, Paquetá. They already had a very good team, and now they add those players. Yeah, I do want to put them high, but I'm putting them. Well, I mean, 9th is pretty high, but I do want to put them higher, but I'm putting them in 9th. Moving on to 8th, Aston Villa. I think they've got a very good team. They've signed Onana, they've signed Barkley, Ealing Jr., Filonier. They're linked with a few other players. And I think the only reason I have them outside of Europe is because they're in the Champions League. Now, I understand for Newcastle, they still managed to get the Conference League, but missed out because Man United won the FA Cup. And they were in the Champions League before. But I think Aston Villa are going to go on a serious run. And people say, oh, the Champions League doesn't always do that. But they're going to have more games, especially if they go deep into the competition, which I think they will. So that is the only reason why I've got them outside of Europe. It was between them and the next team for 7th, and in the end, I just went for the other team in 7th. So the team I'm talking about in 7th is Manchester United. They've got a good squad. They've signed quite a few defenders this window. They've signed as well Joshua Zirkzee, and Jadon Sancho has come back, and it doesn't look like he's leaving. It looks like he is going to stay at Man United. And of course, they've already got Garnacho, Fernandes, Højlund, Mainu, who are all brilliant players. And so the reason why I have Manchester United only in 7th, because I would like to put them in Europa League or maybe even higher. I have them in 7th because they've got quite a few injuries. Now, Rasmus Højlund is going to be out for the first 6 weeks of the season. Now, it doesn't seem like a lot, but that's like almost a sixth of the games that he's going to miss, and he could get more injuries. And when he comes back, who knows if he's going to be as good? And also, he'll be affected for the next couple weeks after he is back, because they always try and rush the recovery so that they can get back playing football. And so the 2 weeks after that will be, so it's more like 2 months for Rasmus Højlund. Then Lenny Yoro, the new centre-back signing, he is out for 2 months, as well as Luke Shaw being out for about the first month. They've got a few other injuries to squad players. And so, with Højlund gone, yeah, they've bought Xerxes, but I don't think Ten Hag's confident in Xerxes just yet. So I'm not entirely sure who they're going to be playing at striker and who's going to partner probably Matthias de Ligt in the midfield. But then talking positively about Manchester United and why we think they're going to finish higher than last season, they've signed Mazraoui, de Ligt, Yoro, Xerxes as 4 very good signings, and Jadon Sancho's come back. I've already said that. Man United have a very good squad, so when all their players are fit, they're going to be very good. So then, moving up, Spurs. I've got them going down from last season. A place down. I didn't have them. They finished 5th last season. I have them finishing 6th this season. Now, the reason why I have them still in 1 place lower is because I think there's 2 teams that are going to be challenging very high and are just going to be a little bit better than Spurs this season. But the reason why I have Spurs high up on the table in 6th is because, 1, their captain Son is absolutely brilliant. He's one of the best players in the league, and so he's going to be brilliant. 2, Dejan Kulusevski is looking very good in pre-season. 3, they've obviously got a brilliant midfield, contain the likes of Maddison and Basuma and Sarr. Their defence obviously very good as well. Romero, Van de Ven, Udogie, Pedro Porro, and then now up front they've been lacking a brilliant, a brilliant top class Premier League striker, but now they have that in Dominic Solanke. I already said that they've signed him from Bournemouth, and so I think they're going to be very good this season with Dominic Solanke. Moving up to 5th, I've gone with Chelsea. Now, Chelsea is one of those 2 teams that I've just mentioned that I think is going to be better than Spurs this season. Last season, they did actually finish in 6th, and they were set to play in the Europa League, but Man United won the FA Cup, so they are going to play Conference League football this season. But I have them in 5th place, and that is because they have Cole Palmer, and around him they have a brilliant squad with the likes of Enzo Fernandez, Romeo Lavia, Caicedo, Colwill, Disasi. Reece James is injured. They still have him. They've got a long list of goalkeepers to choose from. They've got Nicholas Jackson, Mudryk, Madueke, and they've now signed Marquis. I don't know if he'll be the starting striker or the backup striker or what's going to happen with him. But they've signed him from Barcelona, the youngster. And they've also signed Kieran Dewsbury-Hall from Leicester, who is very, very good. And they've now signed Pedro Neto. So they're going to have Pedro Neto and Cole Palmer on the 2 wings. Like, that is brilliant. And obviously they brought in Enzo Maresca as their new manager, and he is a brilliant manager. We saw how good he was with Leicester. And so, yeah, Chelsea up to 5th. So 4th place, Liverpool. I almost went for Chelsea to finish above Liverpool. And the reason for that is because, The reason for that is because Chelsea have a very, very good squad now. They're looking very good under Enzo Maresca. But the reason for Liverpool only being in 4th, and maybe even being in 5th, is because Arne Slot. Not because he's bad, he's a very good manager. But when you move on from someone like Jurgen Klopp, who's been at the club for so long, it's a big adaptation to a new manager, especially when you go from, someone like Klopp, who's been there for years and years, and most of the players have either played under Klopp for almost their whole career, or at least their whole Liverpool career, or they were all signed by Klopp. And so then, yeah. So it's a big adaptation, but teams can still cope with those big adaptations. Man United under their first season with Ten Hag finished top 4. But then they don't seem to be making any signings. At the moment, the top player they're linked with is Georgi Mamadashvili, who's a goalkeeper. And they already have 2 brilliant goalkeepers, Alisson and Kelleher, who are both very good and should be starting in the starting 11 for teams. And now they want to sign another goalkeeper. It's interesting. Well, I don't really know why they're signing a goalkeeper. They were looking at Zubimendi. He chose to stay at Sociedad, and they haven't identified any other targets just yet. But I think they do want a new midfielder. So we'll see what happens. But at the moment, they haven't made any signings, and so I have them in 4th. So moving on, you can see the 3 teams that are left, and 3rd, obviously Newcastle. At the beginning of the video, I think it was quite obvious that it was going to be Arsenal and Man City as the top 2. So Newcastle, not too much to say. They've just got a brilliant team. It looks like they're closing in on signing Mark Guehi. Probably won't have him by the first game, but they'll have him soon. They've got Lloyd Kelly, Kieran Trippier. The list goes on and on. Isak's an absolutely brilliant player, as well as Anthony Gordon. So, yeah, I could talk about Newcastle for quite a while, but I'm not going to, because the video is getting quite long now. But, yeah, Newcastle are going to have a good season, and they're going to be back in the Champions League. So, up to 2nd then, Manchester City. I have them here because over the last few years, we've seen them make big signings. At least one big signing a window. Like, last season they brought in Jeremy Doku, Joško Vardial, who are both brilliant. Year before, we saw them bring in Erling Haaland, who, well, we know how his first 2 seasons went. Pretty good. And the year before that, it was Jack Grealish. The year before that, Ruben Diaz. And they made all of those signings since the year before that, when Liverpool won the league. So since Liverpool have won the league, every year they've made massive signings. I mean, I'm sure they made big signings before, but those in the last, 3 years, 4 years since Liverpool won the league, they've made a lot of signings. Well, not a lot, but they have. But they've made like big money signings. And this season, they've signed quite a few players. Savio from Girona is probably the big one to pick out. But I don't see their big money splash just yet. I don't know if they're waiting, but I don't know. And Manchester City fans are maybe getting a little bit worried. And so I have them in 2nd. And then 1st, Arsenal. I know, like Man City, they haven't made loads of signings, but it's like, what I'm saying is Manchester City normally do make big signings. Arsenal, yes, they signed Declan Rice last year, which was a big signing. But other than Declan Rice, over the last few years, they haven't made absolutely massive signings. They just made good little signings who've developed to be some brilliant players. And they've just signed Riccardo Calafiori, who was brilliant for Italy at the Euros, and can play left back or centre back, so he can fix their left back problems where they haven't really known who to start. And if Gabriel or Saliba gets injured, like Saliba did back in the 2022-2023 season, Calafiori can fill in. They also have Jurriën Timber back from injury, who was injured for basically the whole of last season. And I don't know, are they still waiting on more signings? Could be. And so I have Arsenal first. That is my Premier League predictions. And yeah, so that's the end of the video. See you next time. But yeah, for now, that's bye.